Welcome to Machine Minds, where technology and humanity meet. I'm your host, Greg Terrusian, founder of Samson Rose, a recruiting and search business focused on the robotics and AI industries. The Machine Minds show is where we dive deep into the intricate world of robotics and artificial intelligence. As a staffing industry leader with a passion for the frontiers of technology, I'm pleased to be bringing you intimate conversations with the founders, investors, and trailblazers who are at the heart of the AI and robotics revolution. In each episode, we dig into their journeys, the applications of the products they're working on, and the breakthroughs that are shaping our future. Join us as we explore how these machine minds are transforming the way we live, work, and understand our world. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a tech enthusiast, or just curious about this amazing field, you'll learn something new with each episode. Let's delve into the extraordinary. Let's delve into machine minds. Hello and welcome to Machine Minds. I'm your host, Greg Terrusian, founder of Samson Rose, your robotics talent search partner. And on today's episode, I'm joined by Torrey Smith, co-founder of Endiatx, the creators of Pillbot. Thanks for being on the show today, Torrey.
Greg, super stoked to be here. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Let's jump into it. So, Torrey, I always like to set the stage for the conversation, hear about our guests' backgrounds. And, I was looking back doing some research and your education was actually in aerospace engineering. And then it seems like you quickly transitioned into the medical devices space and had a solid career in R&D. What actually inspired that shift for you from aerospace to medtech?
So I went to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, which is a very learn by doing focused college, right? It's a place where if you're going to call yourself an engineer, you better be taking welding classes and machining stuff and actually making stuff with your hands, right? And so I just really fell in love with making stuff. And I think that I would probably identify as a maker, so to speak. It's been really cool to see the concept of maker spaces and hacker spaces really become popular and part of mainstream culture. And so around the time that I was finishing up my studies, unfortunately, my Aunt Katie was diagnosed with glioblastoma, this terrible kind of brain tumor that just, super aggressive, very, very low survival rates, right? And so that ran its course. And so I was kind of holding in one hand, my aerospace dreams and, the concept of, doing all the cool stuff that you dream about as a kid. But I was also kind of feeling a little bit upset at, the status quo of health tech. Not that it did anything wrong, but just, you wish it could do more. And so I remember that some of the same movies that were inspiring me to become an aerospace engineer also had medical themes. Like if you go back to Inner Space in the 80s, you've got a test pilot, flying this robot, but it gets shrunk down and injected into a person's body. And you get to see it fight, white blood cells and all that cool stuff. Movies like Fantastic Voyage really set the stage before that. And so I was just kind of asking myself, like, hey, man, where is all that crazy high-tech stuff I read about or saw in a movie? And so I had this opportunity to try an internship in the med device startup scene. And it was not glamorous. The pay wasn't high, but I just kind of immediately fell in love with the startup company scene. I love that you could, I think I was like employee number 11 when that company sold. And what I love is that when you're part of a startup company, you can change the whole company's trajectory if you have a breakthrough in the shop or in the laboratory, right? Like nothing is stopping anyone from having a breakthrough that could affect the company. And to realize that one person can have that kind of an impact on their team, it's kind of a big deal. So I just got hooked by the med device startup scene and really decided to make a career out of it.
That's really cool. I hadn't actually thought about the way that you articulated even just startups in general having, I always talk about, because obviously I'm in the hiring world and we primarily work with startups, telling people like, you can have an impact in the company and the product. You're actually working on stuff that's going to go to market or whatever it is. Whereas in larger companies, there's so many levels, there's so many layers, red tape, and sometimes things take a lot longer that to have that impact or ownership or even visibility is reduced. But I hadn't thought about it that your contribution or your breakthrough can impact everyone and the company and the trajectory. I love that.
Some of my, teammates are probably chuckling right now because one of my favorite, lines to drop around the office or the shop is, hey buddy, you have my permission to have a breakthrough at any moment. Right. And I'm just trying to say, like, we might not traditionally as an early stage startup have the budget to hire someone who just did 10 years at SpaceX. Right. Who is, writing the code that is automatically recompiling landing trajectories for the rocket as it's coming in, right? Like, there's just no room for excuses in that kind of a software environment. And yet there are people who thrive there. Gosh, I'd love to just hire a team like that. But in the startup scene, you often find yourself building those skills from the ground up. And so it's an interesting sort of catch-22 that you need to get creative to not get truly trapped in, which is you probably don't have the budget to hire a top, engineer necessarily at the top of their career. And you're probably trying to do groundbreaking work, which is pushing the limits. And so how do you do that? And so it's like, yeah, man, you have my permission to have a breakthrough, right? Like, if you want to go home and wake up with some brilliant, crazy idea that no one's ever thought of, what I can offer you is that idea will be heard. It will be seen. You will have an opportunity to explore it. We're not going to crush your brilliant passion, because we're hoping that somewhere in all of our collective passion is kind of the next big thing.
Yeah. That's awesome. That must create such a good culture and environment for people, which I definitely want to dig into a little bit more in the show, because I think that's super important to talk about. I was just curious before it comes out of my mind, you mentioned that passion or in Slow, like they pushed you to make things with your hands, right? Real hardware, using machines, etc. How did that kind of seed being planted in you, and then also the passion that you spoke about, influence your approach to this industry and to med device?
Well, I tell a lot of people when they say, wow, you're building robot pills with really smart people, you must be one of those, super high functioning people out in the world that we all wish we were. And it's like, actually, I got really ambitious starting at around age 37. That's when I really finally just looked in the mirror. It was like, okay, no more excuses. I have to acknowledge I've got issues with depression. I have to acknowledge that I'm not the most relentless operator that ever existed. I'm just really, really interested in cool stuff, and I want to be a part of something bigger than the status quo. So I didn't get accepted into MIT. I got a really small letter from them saying, heck no. They weren't even, they were so direct. They were like, you're not getting in. And by the way, you weren't even close. And it's like, okay, I get it. Damn. Okay. So I got into Cal Poly Slow and UCLA. Those were sort of the two like totally solid schools that I got into. And I was touring the campuses, and I was excited, right? And at UCLA, everything was just like perfect laboratory quality, right? Like it was amazing. The wind tunnel was just like spick and span. And I was asking people like, so can I throw a model airplane in there? And they actually kind of laughed at me at the whole concept. They're like, why would you even ask that? Like only upper division students working on approved projects would be able to have access to this equipment, right? Really? Like that. Who do you think you are to ask a question like that? And then when I was at Cal Poly, the wind tunnel, instead of like a hexagonal grating that straightens out the airflow before it gets sucked in, they had literally, when they built that wind tunnel, they had just raided all of the straws. Like in those days, it was like plastic straws. And they were just going to all of the fast food joints within like a 30-mile radius and just like grabbing straws. And they built this wall of plastic straws to do the same exact job, right? And the wind tunnel was covered in stickers and like engineering graffiti. And I was like, can you run student projects in here? And they're like, of course you can, right? That's why we built it.
Yeah.
And it was just like this completely different philosophy. Like why would you not do that? Come on, do it. Help me with my project. Get yours in there. Let's do it. And it turns out neither one of those schools of thought is better or worse than the other, right? Like the world needs beautiful white facilities that are hard to get into where you do really serious things. The world also needs hacker spaces.
Yeah, yeah. That's awesome. I think at the stage though, right? And for you, for the learning and the experience, you definitely made the right choice because you don't want to kind of be deterred from trying and being hands-on and getting involved or having the collaboration that you would have in a lab like in Slow.
I, I have had so much attitude in different times in my life, different narratives I run through my head trying to, explain why, I'm on the right course or why I might be onto something that other people aren't. But looking back on it, I think that was me just covering for my own demons and sort of BSing myself. To be honest, right? To actually be honest, I look at engineers coming out of Stanford, and if you're in that scene, right, you're being exposed to people who are constantly saying like, "What's your next startup idea? What startup are you thinking about? Like, do you want to go get a big job? Great, but do you have a startup idea? We can help you incorporate. We can help you write IP." And so, looking back, I kind of have a huge amount of respect for the larger ecosystem that is not only creating engineers, but it's also creating company founders. And so, in the rearview mirror, I had every opportunity to do bigger, bolder things much earlier in my life. But, I suspect like many people out in the world, for every little ray of light, there's a little shadow too. And I don't think people should be fundamentally turned off to that other side of their personality, because sometimes from those areas of self-doubt, it can also come deep passions and desire to change things. And so, I don't want to play coulda, shoulda, woulda. I'm happy to be here. I'm super excited about the next couple of years.
Love the perspective. Yeah, it's refreshing having people in your position that are very self-aware and self-reflective and can articulate that, right? Because I think as a leader, that helps with the team that you bring on, but also their development and their progression as professionals, but then also for you and the company and your product and what you're working on.
It's kind of fun to see that dial crank to 11, because there's always a positive side and then a hilarious fallout. Like I'll have like a 17-year-old, come up and be like, "Wow, this is amazing. I saw you swallow that robot. This is so cool. Hey man, I'm like a hardcore engineer. I've been doing all this stuff since I was a kid." And I'm thinking like, "Oh wow, is this our next genius?" Right? Like, please. And it turns out like they're running student clubs and they're founding all these things and they're in leadership, and that's cool. And then like you work with them over a summer and you realize like, did your dad write most of your resume, right? Was that email I got from you written by your dad? Because it sounded really good. It sounded really heartfelt. But then when you came to work with us, you were also like kind of a person your age, and like, sometimes we need to just grind out crazy work together. And, if you're only thinking about being a leader at this extremely young age, and you're not actually grinding out crazy stuff in parallel with that, we start to ask ourselves like, man, have we been thrown into the rat race from the very beginning by our parents, where we just, whatever it is, I have to be at the top of it? And it's like, it's interesting, right? Like I think I just have an intense desire to be part of something awesome, right? And my ability to contribute is going to, change, day by day.
Yeah. Last question before we move on to the current company and your product. But I was, again, looking at your LinkedIn, doing some research, and you mentioned already one of the companies was acquired while you were there early on. And I saw that kind of a theme of several companies that you worked with had exits. Did those experiences shape your perspective on innovation or entrepreneurship?
Oh, heck yeah. I mean, I love the med device scene because it's such a conflicted scene in my mind. Med device is either like this super high tech community, right? That's just like on the cutting edge of saving lives, or it's kind of like the weird baby brother of a tech giant. Like, why doesn't Google make med devices? Is med device not exciting enough for Google, right? Is it just that there's some regulation involved, right? Like, it seems like, like why is SpaceX attracting the extremely incredible talent and all the new space companies, right? Why do you see this incredible talent, going to a place that isn't med device? Could med device do a better job of being an inspirational community? And then on the flip side of that, I constantly see people who seem to think that with a peristaltic pump and a pile of silicone tubing, somehow there's like the next brilliant genius company idea, and there's a whole pile of money in it, and it's like, looks like the same pump and tube and plastic block and crimp. Like, have you actually created anything new here, or are you just kind of reconfiguring Legos that have been around for like 30 years? So I have this interesting sort of emotional connection to the scene. But the thing that really impressed me with the companies that I fell in with was just the raw perseverance of the founding teams. Most of the companies I ever worked with came to zero cash or very close to zero cash several times while I was there. And we always just refused to give up. So my bosses and mentors would be like, well, the investors just pulled out, but we're going to cobble together a prototype. I know where their hotel is. They're at a conference in San Francisco. And so we'd cobble together an advanced prototype of something that they had used as a justification for pulling the money out there. There's no way you can scale this to a smaller size. So we make it the smaller size the night before. And then my boss, puts this package and the flow model and the tissue sample simulation, right, into the top case on his motorcycle, and he races it through Silicon Valley traffic, just splitting lanes. We're all like hardcore motorcycle jockeys for some reason in the startup scene. Basically busts into the hotel room with these guys, uninvited, and just sets up the flow model and demonstrates that we could debulk plaque in arteries about half the size of what the investors thought we could. And that actually convinced them to put their money back in. And so it's just raw perseverance because you have a passion for the craft and you're committed to the dream, and you're not going to give up on the people who believed in you, right? And that's something that I really love about the startup scene, because that could be any startup company where the people really believe in it. And so all of those companies that I worked at, any company that I worked at for more than like 2 months, ended up having a successful exit. So it's just this long string of successes. But in med device, you can't always expect a giant glittering unicorn success. You might work there a couple of years. I think the longest stint was 9 years to ultimately drive something to market. But the neat thing is you get to hang out with doctors and hear it when they say that you save someone's leg or you save someone's life. And I think that really means a lot to people.
That's powerful. Yeah. So what motivated you to transition from working in the startup scene or focusing on R&D for other companies to becoming a co-founder and starting this company?
Some people are just, everyone's different, right? Everyone has kind of like a different thing that kind of makes them interesting or uniquely relevant in a given moment in space and time. For me, I just have a lot of ideas. I just constantly think of things, and I love to sketch things. I love to draw stuff. I'm always coming up with just ideas in my head. And I think a lot of people are like that out in the world. But for me, it's always really compelling. Like I'll have an image in my mind of some possibility or some moment in the future. And then I just, if I like that image or that moment that I visualize, then I just start walking towards it. And so I started to kind of leave the employee mantra behind when I discovered this crazy event called Burning Man out in the desert. And I was pretty skeptical because I'd been raised by hippie parents, and I felt like I already had whatever that community had to offer. But when I got out there, I was just kind of blown away by the scale of the art. It was like, wow, this is major. And I realized that working as an employee in the med device startup scene, I can't follow every idea. But in this community, of course I could. So my buddies and I started building crazy towers and zip lines. And then we got an idea in our head. We would build a giant Tesla coil. So we did that. And after a couple of years of doing that in our spare time, and also blowing extreme amounts of personal finance in a very irresponsible way, we kind of finally started to realize that we resembled a startup company. And so that was when I started to think, I've had a really crazy idea in my head for a long time, and that's little robots that move around inside the human body. And I realized nothing was stopping me from going official. I needed help to do it, but I really credit that creativity out in the desert with, kind of helping me to embrace imposter syndrome, tear off the mask, go try something really hard. And so going from employee to founder was a big step. And the cool thing about becoming a founder is that you get to finally work on your exact idea. You can put that exact idea into focus. You don't have to convince your boss to let you try it, right? If the company has been incorporated in one direction and it has products laid out, you kind of have to execute that vision, right? That's what an employee would do. But a founder is kind of expected to come up with the next big thing. And so that license to just go after something that you're extremely passionate about that might have some true differentiation and defensibility out in the world is a thrill like none other in the entrepreneurial community.
That's awesome. Your rigs look, just side note, I was looking at them and those art installations, they look awesome. Very cool. I love seeing those.
It was an interesting moment. Like you have this community of 70, maybe 80,000 people now. And you kind of want to distinguish yourself, right? You want to add something to that community because it's such an amazing landscape. And so I had this moment where I was like, I think we finally are popular at Burning Man. And then I was kind of being like, damn, we're popular at Burning Man. Like, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Love that community, but it's 1 week a year, right? And then you put all your toys away and you go back to work. And I don't want to have that level of inspiration only be seen as like an occasional recreational kind of a thing. Silicon Valley is a place like many others where you're kind of encouraged to just swing for the fences at all times. And so I love that you can take the inspiration and creativity that almost everyone has in them somewhere and turn that into companies.
Yeah, well said. Let's switch gears and talk about Pillbot. I'd love for you to explain for the listeners who don't know what Pillbot is, how it functions, and actually how that idea came up, because you said it's something you had in your head for quite a while.
Well, Pillbot is basically a little drone pill that can swim around inside the human stomach. And like any drone, it has the ability to move three-dimensionally. And like many drones now, it has real-time video being broadcast from it. And so we've sort of created an FPV drone, if you will, for inside the human stomach. And what that really creates is a virtual endoscope. And so there are probably 75 million people this year in 2025 who are going to go into a hospital and have an endoscope slid into their stomach to look around. And we're creating a technology that could virtualize that, could allow that to happen through a telemedicine call like we're on right now. And there are some advantages. I mean, you wouldn't have to sedate the person, and it may very well be very inexpensive and accessible. It's kind of this cool way to extend the reach of modern healthcare. And initially, we were very boisterous, thinking like, hey, we're going to disrupt this market and take it over. right now we're starting to think of Pillbot and the products in that ecosystem, because it's really going to become a wider ecosystem of products. We kind of think of like the modern hospital and endoscopy suite as like this battleship in human health. It's like heavy footprint, but really powerful, right? Like it really is like the way to get the job done. I think the Endiatx product ecosystem, Pillbot beyond, probably the little scout plane hanging off the back of the battleship. It's a way to get eyeballs into the human population. Like, if you're going to be in a hospital, symptomatic, with tubes jammed into your body on a bunch of, anesthesia, that's a heavy situation. And wouldn't it be a tragedy if in that moment we diagnose you with a late stage cancer, say in your stomach? And all we can tell you is, unfortunately, this looks terminal. Let's go to palliative care. If we can create cool technology like Pillbot, and there are other companies that are in this space, like in the brain, going up the spinal column. I mean, there are amazing companies out there. Bionaut Labs would be one of them, going up the spinal column. Robotic in Paris, they're in the brain right now. This rice grain size thing. It's so cool. We're sort of in the GI tract. If you can create technology like this that either eliminates the burden of the hospital, like we do, like true telemedicine is what we're building, or just reduces the barrier to entry. Like maybe you swallow a capsule and a magnetic machine moves it around. Our buddies at Navicam, Onx Robotica, are doing sedation-free endoscopy, right? You swallow this pill, you can magnetically fly it around, give you a similar effect. If we can lower the barriers, if we can lower the cost, then at a population level, we can basically address people's symptoms, but also find cancers at earlier stages so that we can actually cure them. And so I think the real hope is with Pillbot is that over time we'll start to rack up saves where doctors say, yeah, we were going after a really minor thing, but it was easy to use Pillbot, so we did, and we found a scary thing. And we found it in time to do something about it, and we wouldn't be able to do that with any other kind of technology. So, you saved a life today. I think that's kind of what we're all sort of shooting for.
Love that. That's awesome. The journey from like that idea, that concept, and I'm sure when you started there was a lot of limitations with the technology or even just miniaturizing it. What challenges did you face, and how did you overcome those?
Well, we had to create a couple of magic bullets, or sort of become a bullet ourselves and fly along and see if we could fly into formation with some other magic bullets that other people were creating in real time. So we had to master just the art of the physically small, right? So we started with big prototypes, and we were able to sort of, within about 18 months, maybe like 15 months of starting the company, we were able to swallow a robot and drive it around inside my stomach, as it turns out, just on the other side of this wall. Mechanical small, that was a big one. Another one was onboard image compression. In the world of camera pills, traditionally you would swallow the pill and it would broadcast images kind of slowly to a collecting device. And then later a nurse or a tech or a doctor would review the footage after the fact and sort of look for a problem. The problem is that kind of starts to limit your total addressable market, because the real bulk of procedures out there are, I stick tube in you, I look around, I see what's wrong. That's real time with three-dimensional control, one for one. And so instead of trying to create a better camera pill, we were really trying to create the world's first virtual endoscope. And the crazy thing is, as it turns out, in the process of doing that, we've stumbled across this whole product ecosystem that, I think the company is going to be excited to talk about over the next months and couple of years. So onboard image compression was a big deal. Like broadcasting live video through the human body is very much non-trivial, and we've become very good at that. I think one of the biggest things, before I get back to you, is lithium battery technology. Lithium ion has come a long way in the years since we founded the company. And initially, if you did the hard numbers, the battery tech, in 2019 and 2020 couldn't really do Pillbot. We made robots that were sinking like stones because of the extra battery capacity we had to put on board. But as the energy density increased, thanks to the electric car and electric airplane worlds, as the C rating increased, thanks to people's desire to charge their cars quickly, and get on with their road trip, all of a sudden, thanks to AirPods, we started to see battery technology getting into the realm where sort of the Venn diagram started to overlap. So we now live in a world where, building things like Pillbot is a very, very realistic thing. If you have a crack team of deep tech engineers willing to take the challenges on head on.
At this point, how many Pillbots have you actually swallowed?
Yeah, I think my number right now is 77.
Wow.
Yeah, I was going to do 78 and 79, and then we canceled last minute. So I think my number is 77. That's kind of a cool number.
That is a cool number. Are there any particular insights that from all of these self-tests that you've got great results from, or very interesting things that have helped influence the product's direction?
Oh man. I mean, when you swallow a robot, you're just hoping for that unicorn flight video that will woe an audience, right? You'd love to see a room full of investors just wide-eyed. You'd love to see normal people going, wow, I'm seeing the future. You'd love to see doctors think like, oh man, can I get my hands on this? Is this in the market yet? But a lot of the time, you're fighting through any number of challenges, right? Like you can imagine before we got onboard image compression really sorted out, you'd have this grainy, pixelated, sometimes grayscale image, like only a couple frames per second. Yeah. You're actually in the human body, but people are seeing what you're doing in real time, and they're thinking like, "Yeah, this is a cool research project, but it sounds like you guys have a ways to go." And that's always a challenge. But you know what? In the recent year and a half, the tech stack really matured, and so I think we're on track to get the products to market. And now we're just kind of making that transition. What is the first product we want to send to market? Is it the big, bold version of the vision, or, is this ecosystem expanding? And, is there an early win that we can't ignore, right? So that's an important conversation. And then another important conversation is, do we keep our head in the clouds, building the next crazy thing, from the foundation of Pillbot? How far can we go with the stack? Or, do we want to, really buckle down and get this work done and become a real company that has products and has revenue? And so, that's an active conversation. It can be bittersweet at times, but just to be having that conversation is a huge privilege.
Yeah. Yeah. And you guys recently closed your Series A, so congratulations. And that, takes you further along this direction of being a real company and looking at commercial viability and scaling, etc. So that's huge. Very huge.
It's amazing to have a couple of years of runway in the bank. So many times, we'd be getting onto a stage or a Shark Tank event, somewhere in the world. We've won Shark Tanks in San Francisco. We've won Shark Tanks in Hong Kong, right? We've been all over the world trying to get people to buy into this dream. Many of those times we would be getting onto stage knowing that, we only had a couple of weeks of runway. And that takes a certain bravado and sort of fierce loyalty from the team. But it also means that you are often in a perpetual sprint, and long-term thinking, long-term projects can't really be even activated. And so now the company is in a position where it can really do some more long-term thinking, and that's a pretty exciting moment to be in.
Yeah, I bet. For the listeners who either haven't had an endoscopy or who don't know anyone that's had it, can we talk about the patient experience comparing the two, Pillbot and the traditional? Because it sounds terrible.
Sure, right? So we're, in a basic sense, we're just kind of trying to explore the world's tummy aches. right? So I'll paint you the picture of right now, which is if you need even a basic gastroscopy, which is just like an endoscopy that's kind of focused on your stomach. In the UK, people are waiting like 18 months for that. And it's crazy. Right? It's like 18 months, but it's like a 10 or 15 minute procedure. And there's something like 440,000 people that are on the wait list for a gastroscopy. And I think during COVID, we all sobered up and realized why you might have to wait is, hey, there's a risk of getting you physically in the hospital. We have to knock you out. We have to take this expensive thing and slide it into you. Then that thing has to be cleaned off. Very highly paid, trained people need to be taking care of you. Like if you're a patient in the world of the upper endoscopy, you might have symptoms that make you suspect, you need to see a doctor or a hospital. That might send you to an ER or to urgent care. But they're not going to give you an endoscopy on hospital visit 1. What they're going to do is take your vitals and make sure that you're not dying. So you're going to have these symptoms. You go to the hospital once. From there, hopefully, you're going to get a referral to like a primary care physician, like someone that can actually sit down and talk to you and see what we need to do with you. So on visit number 2, that's when what you're shooting for is to get the referral to your gastroenterologist. All right. Cool. So you get the referral. I mean, some people do. At every step of the game, people fall out, right? But on visit number 3, for a typical person, you're actually sitting down with a gastroenterologist. And this is exciting. Now, it's weird because weeks or months may have passed since you first had these symptoms. The symptoms might not have come back. Again, people are falling out because of this. But you sit down with your gastro and you're like, let's do this. Let's go look. Sorry, mate, we've got to try you on a diet, maybe try you on some antacids, because knocking you out and jamming a tube into your body isn't something that makes sense to do all the time. So you go through this process, and maybe on visit 4, 5, 6 for some people, you go and you get an actual endoscopy. And in 5 or 10 minutes, typically, they're able to determine your stomach looks great, get out of here. And you're just like, I mean, how many tens of thousands of dollars or pounds got charged to who knows how many insurance providers? How many tiers of care that involved, right? Like it's this huge ecosystem, right? Again, it's this battleship. And you, the patient, just lit up all the lights on the battleship. You just had a tour through every chamber of the battleship. You got to see the bridge. You got to tour the main turrets, right? You got to walk around the ship. And at the end of the day, you, like many people, were fine, but like this huge expense was incurred. Maybe 10 to 15% of the time, they find something and really need to biopsy it and do a lab. The vast majority of patients actually just need to be proven that their stomachs look great. So what we kind of propose here is just a different system, which is just imagine if you could just say, Alexa, my tummy hurts, and Pillbot shows up at your house. Like, how about next morning and you drink some water and you swallow this thing? And like, honestly, like if we're really allowing ourselves to just think a couple years into the future here, right? Again, this is not FDA cleared yet. We do not have a product in the market. This is just me speculating about what is coming soon, hopefully, right? Hopefully you just say, Alexa, my tummy hurts, and you swallow this pill and it swims around, hopefully on its own, right? Comes up with some diagnosis and boom, either you get a clean bill of health or without even ever going to the hospital, you have an important result. And so it's not an incremental improvement we're trying to do for patients. We're really trying to do a sea change where you just extend the reach of modern healthcare, 10 to 100 times beyond where it goes right now.
Yeah, I'm from the UK, obviously, originally. I don't know if my accent gave that away, but the healthcare system there is terrible. It is very delayed. It's so backed up. It's so slow. So being in the US and, having a PPO is such a blessing, but still
It's a lot of fun. It's also kind of funny. Like I lost both my grandfathers early to heart attacks. And so, I have a family now. I'm really trying to be a stable presence for them. And I'm thinking like, hey, how about we get my heart checked out just to know, right? And I'm with Stanford, and I love those guys. And my PA, I don't even need to see a doctor, but I go in for my PA, and he's like, heck yeah, I got you covered, man. And get this referral. I called him up yesterday. Hey, can I get a CT scan of my heart with calcium scoring to look at it? And they're like, yeah, the earliest we can get you in is, how's tomorrow at 7:15 a.m.?
That's great. Yeah,
and so like, bam, this morning I'm getting a CT scan less than 24 hours after I asked for it. But they did take American Express. Right.
Oh,
right.
yeah.
They were like, hey, this is not covered under your insurance. And I'm like, oh shit, it's gonna be $10,000, right? And they're like, no, it's like $360 or $330. And I was like, hey, that's not too bad.
Right. Yeah, for something elective that you push to get.
Right. And I'm like, hey, maybe I can use my company debit card, like declined. Oh, damn. Okay. So American Express. And so it's funny because in the UK, you have this incredibly like warm arm you get to put around the population saying, if you're sick, we will take care of you, right? Like your taxes have paid for this, right? There's a system. But at the same time, you might have to wait, and you might have to wait a really long time. And for some things that's okay. For cancers that could be growing right now, maybe the 18-month wait is not okay. Yeah. And here in the United States, it's like, oh, you want it? Boom, you got it. But just like swipe your credit card anytime. And so I'm actually not in a position where I just want to take pot shots in any ecosystem. Like, if we can make better technology that lowers the barrier to entry, that opens up the funnel for the really high end, heavy medical footprint, and sort of with an open funnel of inexpensive robot pills, we can sort of get population level diagnostics done, screenings, right? It's going to make the conversation better. Like, the last thing I want to do is sit down in a room full of stakeholders with all of the constraints of the right now and just fight and see if I can win and make someone else lose, right? Like, I don't want to play that zero-sum game about the snapshot of right now. I want to work with really inspired people to change the game and simply make it a more fun conversation, right? Yeah. So there's no perfect healthcare system right now. But if we're kind of committed to, each of us trying to push it forward and make improvements, there's no reason to be morose about it. You just have to find a way that you can engage and actually move the ball forward.
Yeah. The industry, the medtech industry, is obviously known for the regulatory hurdles and things like that. How have you navigated those while trying to maintain innovation in the company? I know you mentioned like empowering people to have breakthroughs and things like that, which is great for the culture. But how do you embrace that and foster that while trying to navigate
The crazy thing is, while I was an early stage employee at startup companies, just trying hard never to get a promotion because R&D engineer was the title I loved more than anything, right? Napkin sketch, the actual real thing in a person, like that's what I love. So during that time, the funny thing is FDA has never been my problem, right? It's been the assumptions of people in this community saying you could never get a lithium battery approved in a pill. People would just say that as if it was a fact. It turns out that's not actually a fact. I had this amazing conversation with FDA, late 2023, during our pre-sub meeting, and they were like, "This is awesome, lithium batteries. That's going to be a spicy one. We want to work with you on the engineering plan." Right? Like, we want to see how you think you can do this safely. And we're excited about seeing this product become real. And you realize that was never impossible. Likewise, other people will say, oh, you can never patent that. I found a patent and it shows like a robot in the body. So you can't have IP. So you can't fundraise. And that's not true at all, right? Let IP lawyers do what they do, which is sometimes you have to narrow a claim, or sometimes you just get creative, or you might try a different approach, or a lot of that IP may have expired. Or maybe the team that has that patent are people you can go make friends with. Like the very first thing that I do when I learn about another team doing something really cool is I go make friends with them. Like for example, Robotic in Paris, they just closed a pretty impressive Series A round. They're doing tiny robots in the brain right now. And I'm thinking, gosh, could that have helped my Aunt Katie? And it turns out the CEO, Bertrand Duplat, he lost his mother to glioblastoma. And that was a big part of why he and his co-founder, Joanna Cartocci, founded that company. And you just realize there are human beings all over the world trying to do cool stuff. Don't shy away from them. Go make friends with them. So the interesting thing on the regulatory hurdles is that any appropriate regulatory body is going to ask you in the health tech scene is this thing safe? Does it actually work? Does it get the job done? And do doctors even want to use it when it's all said and done? That's basically what your interaction with FDA would be like in the United States. Is it safe? Does it work? Does anyone want to use it? And theoretically, we should have pretty good answers to those three questions, right? It's when people start to try to beat around that bush. Maybe it's not safe. Maybe it just doesn't work that well. That's when you start to dig yourself into a problematic area.
Yeah, that makes sense. Before we start wrapping up here, I'm curious about any advice that you would offer to aspiring founders looking to enter the medtech space.
The advice would be do it right now. You don't need to wait until you are safe. Investors love founders who have nothing to lose and who are just hell or high water going for it with 100% of their faculties. So investors aren't going to want to invest in a part-time founder who has a really cush day job and they're just kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. If you have a crazy idea that offers differentiation and defensibility and you're willing to go full-time on it, my recommendation would be to cobble together some version of a prototype and just get yourself on local stages and start pitching. Call me up, I'll intro you to all the early stage angels that, believed in us. But I would caution you to look in the mirror and ask yourself, are you just trying to make a quick buck because you think medtech has a lot of money and you think you can just rearrange Lego pieces? Like, if what you're creating is an app, do you really think you're that special? Do you really think that you're the only one with that idea? Because I mentor founders at the Founder Institute, and really anyone beyond, anyone involved in awesome health tech. I love to mentor people early on. It's like 99% BS. It is very rare that I actually see someone saying, I want to do something actually kind of fresh, right? Like with Pillbot, it's kind of like a camera pill, but with propulsion, and it would work over a telemedicine call. With those three things, all of a sudden, Pillbot has differentiation and defensibility. Pillbot is trying to do something that literally no one else is even trying to do right now. And I hope that changes, right? That will change. We will see people flood into this space, and that's going to be good for patients. But when we founded this company, we had a hard thing to create, but in creating it, we earned ourselves differentiation and defensibility. And that's really important. Like if you're going to put your whole heart and soul into something, make sure that it's something you can go the distance with.
That's awesome. And now with the new funding and, trying to approach these new products and commercial viability, etc., I'm assuming at some point you're going to be looking to grow the team as well. What do you look for from people, that engineers or just team members in general, to join the company?
Well, right now the company is all about legitimizing its standing in the med device community, coming up with a product and getting to revenue. And so that means that, the crazy wild garage R&D days are probably in the past. And now a lot of the hiring has to do with people that can get us through the various levels that get you to revenue. I used to think maybe FDA would be the scary hurdle. I really don't think that's scary. I think that's just good, honest work between people at our company and people at FDA. One of the least trivial areas of medtech is on the medical billing side. Once you get FDA approved, doctors may want to use the technology. The technology may be available, safe, and effective, but billing insurance codes take a little bit of time to catch up with technology. And it's very important for founders to be aware of that environment and begin to educate themselves on how they might initially get a billing code that they could use to actually sell and get reimbursed for the product, and then understand how that might evolve over time. The earlier you can get a reimbursement strategy put together for any kind of medical device or medtech, the better. And that's going to really help you in the eyes of more serious investors as you climb that ladder.
Nice. So having a team on board that can help with that, or people that have navigated that before, would that be helpful?
Yeah, and that could be consultants. It could be full time. It's kind of up to the team to decide, how you fill those roles. But when Medtronic, purchased they purchased Covidien. After Covidien purchased Given Imaging, that was a nearly $1 billion sale for the original camera pill company back in 2014. Medtronic gets Covidien in 2015. It was only after more than a decade that Given Imaging, the creators of the camera pill, had fought their way through the medical billing environment and actually started to build revenue. So I think Given Imaging had someone swallow a camera pill in October of 1997, off the top of my head. I think FDA clearance came in 2001. So like reasonable cadence, not crazy. But then they really didn't build huge revenue with that product for like almost a decade. It was a really slow burn, and I think it was heartbreakingly slow at that time. And so a huge amount of work had to go into navigating how you get sales, how you get reimbursement. And I think it's just important for founding teams to not be naive about that. Probably seek out experts who have done it before.
Makes sense. Well, look, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show today, for sharing your story, sharing about the company, the product, and giving us a little teaser that there's more to come and more product lines. I really appreciate it. And I really enjoy this conversation. So thank you again.
Greg, it's a pleasure to be here. And if anyone is working on something crazy, I would just ask you directly to reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'll be honored to help any way I can.
Perfect. Where are the best places for people to find you, the company, and get in touch? Is it LinkedIn?
I think LinkedIn for me, and then for Endiatx, it's just endiatx.com. And I think you'll find all the latest and greatest stuff right there.
Awesome. We'll put those links in the show notes. But thank you again. I look forward to seeing everything you guys do.
Thank you so much.